The orbital memorial gardens of New Aurora Station hung suspended against Earth's luminous backdrop, a crystalline structure that seemed to float among the stars. Through its transparent walls, the pale blue marble of humanity's cradle cast a gentle glow across the assembled mourners. Among them, beings from 30 different worlds stood in solemn tribute, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. Admiral Reeves stood at the podium, her weathered face reflecting the gravity of the moment. We gather today to honor Dr. Isabella Morgan, whose work transformed our understanding of consciousness itself. Her voice carried across the chamber, where thousands had assembled to pay their respects to the legendary xenobiologist. Above them, a holographic display showed Dr. Morgan as she had appeared in her final lecture, a tall woman with fierce eyes and streaks of silver in her auburn hair, gesturing passionately as she spoke about interspecies understanding. The image sparked murmurs among the Centaurian delegation, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with remembered wisdom. High above the gathering, unnoticed by most, a shadow moved. Cathar, supreme hunter of the Nexian Empire, observed the proceedings through compound eyes that could track quantum fluctuations. His massive form, nearly 3 meters of iridescent scales, and evolved killing efficiency, remained perfectly still against the station's outer hull. Every aspect of his biology screamed predator, from the neural sensors that could detect fear pheromones across vast distances to the crystalline claws capable of shearing through battleship armor. Yet for the first time in his 4 centuries of existence, Cathar felt something alien to his kind: uncertainty. The mourners below represented species that once would have been merely prey to his people: the Artathi, with their delicate crystalline forms; the Meridians, whose empathic abilities once made them prime targets for Nexian hunting parties; even a delegation of Voidsingers, beings who had hidden in the spaces between stars to escape Nexian pursuit. Dr. Morgan didn't just advance xenobiology. Admiral Reeves continued, her voice carrying to Cathar's enhanced auditory receptors. She fundamentally changed how we view consciousness across species. Her work proved that even the most deeply ingrained evolutionary behaviors could be transcended through understanding. Cathar's primary hunting claws flexed involuntarily. The humans didn't know the half of it. They couldn't comprehend how deeply Morgan's work had shaken the foundations of Nexian society. For 50,000 years, his species had ruled through fear, treating the galaxy as their hunting grounds. Their neural chemistry demanded the terror of other beings, not just for sustenance, but as a fundamental part of their identity. Then came the humans, and with them, Isabella Morgan. The funeral procession moved toward the central chamber, where Morgan's body lay in state. Cathar watched as her daughter, Commander Juliana Morgan, stood beside the crystal casket. She had her mother's bearing, that same fearless stance that had first caught Cathar's attention when Isabella Morgan had faced him in her laboratory, armed with nothing but curiosity and compassion. The time had come. With liquid grace that belied his massive size, Cathar began to move. Security systems tracked his descent, but he had no intention of hiding. Not today. This was to be a public declaration, one that would send shockwaves through the galaxy. Gasps and cries of alarm rippled through the crowd as Cathar's form became visible. Security officers moved to defensive positions, weapons humming to life. The Artathi delegation retreated behind their energy shields, while the Meridians' empathic fields flared with ancient terror. Commander Morgan stepped forward, her hand raised to stay the security forces. "State your purpose, Hunter Cathar," she called out, using his formal title. Her voice carried the same steady confidence as her mother's. Cathar moved with deliberate slowness, each movement carefully choreographed to appear non-threatening, a concept that would have been alien to him just decades ago. He stopped before the crystal casket, his massive form reflecting in its polished surface. "I come to honor the hunt," he announced, his translator rendering his complex harmonics into standard Galactic, "but not as my kind once understood it." From a ceremonial pouch, he withdrew an object that caused every Nexian present to freeze in shock. the heartstone of the first hunt, their species' most sacred relic, never before seen by outside eyes. Its crystalline surface caught the light of Earth, sending rainbow refractions across the assembled faces. "Your mother taught us that the greatest hunt is not for prey," Cathar said, addressing Commander Morgan but projecting his voice to all present. "It is the hunt for understanding, for transcendence of our own limitations." With devastating gentleness, he placed the heartstone atop Morgan's casket. "Today, the Nexian Empire declares a new era. We will no longer be ruled by our evolutionary imperatives. We choose, as humans taught us we could choose, to become more than what we were born to be." The silence that followed was profound enough to swallow stars. In that moment, as Earth's light played across the heartstone and created a bridge of rainbow light between predator and prey, the galaxy changed forever. And somewhere, Cathar was certain, Isabella Morgan was smiling at the poetry of it all. 15 years earlier, humanity had learned the hard way that they weren't alone in their corner of the galaxy. The Nexian warships had appeared without warning, their bioorganic hulls writhing against the backdrop of Earth's night sky. They emerged over major cities like living shadows, their very presence triggering primal fears encoded in the human psyche. Dr. Isabella Morgan had been working late in her quantum psychology lab at the Global Science Institute when the first ships appeared over New Delhi. While others fled, she stood transfixed by the live feeds, watching the Nexian hunters move through crowds with terrible grace. Their iridescent scales shifted colors as they pursued their prey, a hypnotic display that she immediately recognized as more than mere camouflage. "Record everything," she ordered her eye assistant, eyes never leaving the screens. "Spectral analysis, movement patterns, target selection algorithms. Every detail matters." Her team thought she had lost her mind. "Dr. Morgan," her assistant director had pleaded, "we need to evacuate. The Defense Forces air. Look at their hunting patterns," she interrupted, gesturing at the holographic display. "They're not targeting military installations or infrastructure. They're not even going for population density. They're selecting for something else entirely." The Nexians moved with terrible purpose, bypassing easy targets to pursue specific individuals. Their choices seemed random at first, until Morgan began mapping emotional response patterns across the affected areas. A horrifying picture emerged. "They're harvesting fear," she whispered, the revelation striking her like a physical blow. "Not just killing. They're cultivating specific neurochemical responses in their victims." The first month of the invasion defied all military response. Conventional weapons barely scratched their living ships. Energy weapons were absorbed by their scaled armor. Humanity's most advanced defense systems seemed primitive compared to beings who had evolved for interstellar hunting. But while the world's military forces focused on finding ways to kill the Nexians, Morgan devoted herself to understanding them. She worked tirelessly, analyzing every scrap of data from their attacks. The breakthrough came during her analysis of their target selection process. "Pull up the global map of Nexian attack patterns," she commanded during one late-night session. The holographic display filled her lab with a web of red lines tracking Nexian movements. Now overlay with centers of mindfulness practice, meditation centers, monasteries, traditional spiritual sites. The correlation was undeniable. Areas with high concentrations of meditation practitioners showed significantly lower rates of Nexian attacks. At first, Morgan thought it might be coincidence, but as she dug deeper, the pattern became impossible to ignore. "They can't hunt what they can't frighten," she realized. The implications were staggering. Through captured data cores and risky direct observation, Morgan began piecing together the Nexians' evolutionary history. They had emerged on a death world where fear itself became a weapon and food source. Over millions of years, they evolved the ability to metabolize the complex neurochemicals produced by terror, eventually becoming dependent on them for survival. When they reached the stars, they found an all-you-can-eat buffet of new species to terrorize. Their technology evolved around their hunting practices, Their society structured entirely on the pursuit and consumption of fear. They had never encountered a species that could consciously control its fear response, until humans. Morgan presented her findings to the Global Defense Council in a session that would change the course of the war. "We've been fighting the wrong battle," she declared. "The Nexians aren't invading us for territory or resources. They're hunting us for our fear. But humanity has something unique in the galaxy. We've developed techniques to transcend our basic instincts." Her proposal was radical. Instead of trying to outfight the Nexians, they would deny them their food source. Morgan developed a revolutionary neural training program that could teach people to regulate their fear response. Not to suppress it. That was impossible. But to transform it into something the Nexians couldn't process. The first trials were conducted with volunteers from meditation centers. The results exceeded even Morgan's expectations. Nexian hunters became confused when confronting trained individuals, their attacks growing erratic and ineffective. More importantly, some Nexians began showing signs of distress, their biology unable to cope with prey that refused to generate the expected fear response. But Morgan's true genius emerged in what she did next. Rather than simply using this weakness as a weapon, she saw an opportunity for transformation. She began reaching out to individual Nexians, offering them a way to transcend their own biological imperatives. Cathar had been one of the first to respond, though not in the way anyone expected. He had burst into her lab one night, fully intending to make her his prey. Instead, he found her calmly sitting at her desk, drinking tea. "Would you like to understand why you can't frighten me?" she had asked, gesturing to an empty chair as if entertaining a colleague rather than facing an apex predator. That single question had shattered 50,000 years of certainty. Cathar found himself sitting down, his hunting claws retracted, engaging in the first real dialogue between their species. Morgan showed him brain scans, explained neural plasticity, and most importantly, offered hope that his kind could be more than what evolution had made them. Word spread through the Nexian fleet. Some responded with rage, doubling down on their hunting efforts. Others, particularly younger Nexians, began to question their society's foundations. The first defectors came in ones and twos, then in groups, all seeking Morgan's help in breaking their addiction to fear. The Nexian Empire faced its first civil war. Traditional hunters fought against progressives who had embraced Morgan's teachings. The conflict threatened to tear their civilization apart, until Morgan proposed a solution that would satisfy both sides' deepest needs: the hunt for understanding. "Your species evolved to pursue," she told Cathar during one of their sessions. "But who says fear must be the quarry? What if you hunted knowledge instead? Wisdom, transcendence." In her lab that day, as Earth's sun cast long shadows across her instruments, Morgan had planted the seeds of a revolution that would transform both their species. She never lived to see its final fruition, but as Cathar stood before her casket 15 years later, the full scope of her vision was about to unfold in ways that would reshape the galaxy forever. The first official meeting between human and Nexian representatives took place in a reinforced chamber at the Global Science Institute. Dr. Morgan sat alone at a steel table, facing 6 of the most powerful Nexian hunters in the sector. The room's other occupants, military officers, diplomats, and security personnel, watched from behind quantum-hardened barriers, certain they were about to witness her death. Cathar led the Nexian delegation, his towering form making the chamber feel cramped despite its generous dimensions. "You claim to understand us," he had said, vocal harmonics rippling with skepticism. "Prove it." Morgan's response shocked everyone present. She deactivated the neural dampeners that had been masking her emotional output. "I understand that right now you can smell my fear," she said calmly. "I'm terrified. Any rational being would be. But watch what happens next." The Nexians' sensory crests flared as Morgan's fear scent filled the chamber. Then, before their compound eyes, something unprecedented occurred. Through measured breathing and focused meditation techniques, Morgan systematically transformed her fear into curiosity. The biochemical signature of her terror morphed into something the Nexians had never encountered, the complex neurochemical cocktail of scientific fascination. "You see," Morgan said, noting their confusion, "fear isn't the only sustenance available to your kind. There are other emotions, other states of consciousness that could provide even richer nourishment." That meeting lasted 12 hours. By its end, two fundamental truths had been established. Humans could control their fear in ways that defied Nexian understanding, and the Nexians were capable of consuming emotions other than terror. The implications devastated Nexian society. Younger hunters, led by Kithar, began experimenting with Morgan's techniques. They discovered that the rush of intellectual discovery, the thrill of solving complex problems, even the deep satisfaction of creative expression could sustain them. Some found these new emotional energies more fulfilling than the straightforward high of fear. Morgan established the Consciousness Exchange Program, working with willing Nexian subjects to expand their psychological capabilities. Kithar became her most dedicated student, spending countless hours in her lab as they mapped the boundaries between their species' understanding. "Your people are trapped in an evolutionary dead end," Morgan explained during one session, monitoring Kithar's neural patterns as he attempted a meditation exercise. "You developed such a successful hunting strategy that you never needed to evolve beyond it. But now you have something more powerful than evolutionary pressure. You have choice." Kithar's progress was remarkable. He learned to sustain himself on the complex emotions generated by scientific discovery, artistic appreciation, and philosophical discourse. More importantly, he began teaching other Nexians, proving that Morgan's methods could work on a larger scale. But not everyone embraced change. Traditional hunter clans saw Morgan's work as an existential threat. They launched attacks on research facilities, tried to assassinate progressive leaders, and worked to undermine the growing movement toward transformation. The violence came to a head during the Meridian Conference, where representatives from a dozen species had gathered to discuss Morgan's proposals for galactic cooperation. Traditional hunters attacked the conference center, determined to destroy what they saw as corruption of their species' purity. What they didn't expect was the response from progressive Nexians. Kithar and his followers defended the conference not through violence, but by projecting a unified consciousness state that the traditionalists couldn't process, a combination of compassion, intellectual certainty, and transcendent purpose that their fear-dependent systems couldn't handle. The battle became a turning point. Traditional hunters across the galaxy watched as their kin demonstrated power beyond anything their old ways could achieve. Morgan's methods weren't weakening the Nexians, they were evolving them into something greater. "We don't have to stop being hunters," Kithar explained to his confused kin. "We simply have to expand our understanding of what we hunt. The universe offers prey far more satisfying than fear. Knowledge, wisdom, understanding, connection. These are quarry worthy of our greatest abilities." Research centers began appearing across Nexian space, often built alongside traditional hunting grounds. Young Nexians learned to channel their predatory instincts into scientific pursuit, diplomatic challenges, and artistic expression. They discovered that the thrill of solving an impossible equation could match the rush of a traditional hunt. Morgan worked tirelessly, traveling between Earth and Nexian worlds, helping establish training centers and adaptation programs. She developed specialized techniques for different Nexian clans, recognizing that the path to transformation wouldn't be the same for all. But her greatest achievement was helping the Nexians understand themselves. "You're not just predators," she told them. "You're seekers. The hunger that drives you isn't just for fear. It's for experience, for understanding, for growth. You can choose what you hunt." The movement grew beyond anyone's expectations. Nexian ships that once brought terror now carried scholars and scientists. Hunting grounds became research stations. The very technology that had made them fearsome predators was repurposed for exploration and discovery. Kithar and Morgan's relationship became legendary, the hunter and the scientist who proved that understanding could bridge any gulf. Their work laid the foundation for a new galactic society, one where former prey species could work alongside their former hunters in pursuit of greater knowledge. As Morgan's health began to fail, she worked even harder, as if racing against time to ensure her vision would survive her. Cathar spent long hours in her lab, learning everything he could, knowing that soon he would have to continue their work alone. "Promise me," she had said during their final meeting, her voice weak, but her eyes still fierce with purpose. "Promise me you'll show them the next step. Show them what we can become together." Cathar had given his word. Now, standing before her casket, he prepared to fulfill that promise in a way that would complete the transformation she had begun. The Nexian Civil War began not with a declaration, but with a question. In the grand hunting halls of the Imperial Palace on Nexus Prime, a young hunter named Vextar had stood before the High Council and asked, "What if there is greater prey than fear?" The question rippled through Nexian society like a quantum shockwave. Within days, battle lines were drawn between traditionalists who saw any change as extinction and progressives who had tasted the intoxicating possibilities Dr. Morgan's research had revealed. The conflict that followed would reshape not just Nexian civilization, but the entire galaxy. Traditional hunting clans struck first, targeting research facilities where Morgan's consciousness expansion programs were being conducted. They believed they could end the corruption quickly through shows of overwhelming force. They were wrong. The progressive Nexians, led by Cathar, had learned more than just consciousness control from humans. They had learned strategy, adaptation, and most importantly, the power of choice. When the traditionalists attacked the research center on Vega II, they found themselves facing something unprecedented: Nexian hunters who could switch off their fear response entirely. "You hunt what we no longer possess," Cathar had broadcast across all frequencies as his ships engaged the traditionalist fleet. "But we have learned to hunt something you cannot comprehend." The battle that followed demonstrated the gulf between old and new ways. Traditional hunters, dependent on inspiring terror in their prey, found their tactics useless against opponents who had mastered their own consciousness. Progressive forces, fueled by the complex emotional energies of discovery and purpose, fought with unprecedented coordination and innovation. But the true turning point came from an unexpected source. Dr. Morgan, watching the conflict escalate, proposed a radical solution. "Your species needs to hunt," she told Cathar during a secret meeting on a neutral space station. "It's fundamentally who you are. So let's give them the greatest hunt in history." Her proposal was audacious: transform the Civil War into a different kind of contest. Instead of fighting for dominance, both sides would compete to achieve higher states of consciousness and understanding. The traditionalists' hunting instincts would be redirected toward pursuing enlightenment itself. The challenge of transcendence, as it became known, split the galaxy into hunting grounds of a different sort. Traditional clans, unable to resist the allure of such unprecedented prey, found themselves pursuing quarry they couldn't see or smell: wisdom, innovation, artistic mastery. Many discovered that the rush of intellectual breakthrough far exceeded the simple high of fear hunting. Research centers became the new hunting lodges. Young Nexians learned to track quantum patterns in consciousness itself, to stalk the edges of scientific understanding, to pursue the ghostly trail of philosophical truth. The very traits that had made them fearsome predators: patience, persistence, heightened senses, proved perfectly adapted to scientific discovery. But the transformation came at a cost. Some traditional clans, unable or unwilling to adapt, chose self-exile, disappearing into unexplored space rather than change. Others underwent psychological collapse as their fear-dependent biology rebelled against new consciousness patterns. Morgan worked tirelessly to help even the most resistant cases, developing specialized programs for different Nexian physiologies. "Every hunter can evolve," she insisted, even when faced with seemingly hopeless cases. "The key is helping them recognize that they're not losing their identity. They're expanding it." The broader galactic community watched this transformation with mixed reactions. Some species, particularly those who had suffered most under Nexian predation, remained skeptical. Others saw an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. The Meridians, with their natural empathic abilities, were among the first to offer help. They worked with progressive Nexians to develop new techniques for consciousness expansion. The Artathi contributed their quantum computation expertise to map the neurological changes Morgan's methods produced. Even the reclusive Voidsingers emerged from their dimensional pockets to share ancient wisdom about consciousness transformation. Cathar found himself at the center of this revolution, bridging the gap between old ways and new possibilities. He established the first Transcendence Academies, where traditional hunting techniques were repurposed for consciousness exploration. Young Nexians learned to use their predatory focus for meditation, their tracking skills for scientific research, their pack coordination for group consciousness experiments. But the greatest challenge came from within. As more Nexians evolved beyond fear hunting, their society had to restructure itself completely. Traditional hierarchies based on hunting prowess had to be reimagined. New forms of status emerged, based on scientific achievement, artistic creation, and consciousness mastery. Morgan watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and concern. The hardest part, she confided to Cathar during one of their last meetings, isn't changing what you hunt. It's changing how you see yourself as a hunter. She worked until her final days, documenting everything, preparing the next generation of both humans and Nexians to continue her work. Even as her health failed, she pushed forward, driven by a vision of what the galaxy could become. Your people aren't losing their nature, she told a gathering of young Nexians in her final public lecture. You're fulfilling it. The greatest predators don't just adapt to their environment, they transform it. And now you're hunting in realms no species has ever reached before. As Cathar stood before her casket, holding the Heartstone, he understood finally what she had seen all along. The Civil War hadn't been about choosing between being hunters or something else. It had been about choosing what kind of hunters they would become. And now, before representatives of every spacefaring species, he prepared to reveal the next phase of their evolution, one that would change the very nature of consciousness in the galaxy. The Heartstone pulsed with ancient energy as Cathar held it above Dr. Morgan's casket, its crystalline surface reflecting the combined light of Earth and stars. Every Nexian present recognized the magnitude of this moment, the sacred relic of their species, never before revealed to outside eyes, now displayed before the galaxy. For 50,000 years, Cathar's voice resonated through the memorial chamber. This stone has symbolized our awakening to consciousness. Our ancestors believed it marked the moment we became hunters. He paused, his compound eyes scanning the assembled gathering. They were wrong. Commander Juliana Morgan stepped forward, her mother's research tablet clutched in her hands. She had spent the last weeks decoding her mother's final work, understanding at last the full scope of what Dr. Morgan had set in motion. Dr. Morgan's final research wasn't just about Nexian consciousness, Cathar continued. She discovered something far more profound. The Heartstone isn't a symbol of predation. It's a key to universal consciousness transformation. The holographic displays activated, showing Dr. Morgan's last theoretical models. The stone's crystalline structure appeared in rotating detail, its quantum patterns matching brainwave frequencies from dozens of species. Your mother, Cathar addressed Commander Morgan directly, learned that our most sacred relic is actually an artifact of consciousness technology far older than our species. We didn't create it. We found it. And it changed us. But we only accessed a fraction of its potential. The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathering. The Artathi delegation's crystalline forms resonated in harmonic response. The Meridian's empathic fields pulsed with recognition. Even the Voidsingers emerged further from their dimensional pockets, their ethereal forms drawn to the stone's energy. Dr. Morgan discovered that the Heartstone can facilitate consciousness evolution in any species, Cathar explained. Our ancestors used it to become apex predators. But she proved it could do so much more. It can bridge minds, transcend biological limitations, even access higher dimensions of thought. He placed the stone gently on the casket, where it began to pulse with a soft, rhythmic light. This was her final gift, the understanding that consciousness itself is the ultimate frontier, not just for Nexians, not just for humans, but for all sentient life. Commander Morgan stepped forward, her mother's research tablet interfacing with the stone. The holographic displays erupted with new data, consciousness patterns from every known species, overlapping, interconnecting, evolving into something greater than their individual parts. My mother believed that consciousness wasn't just an evolutionary byproduct. She said, her voice steadied despite the emotion in her eyes. It's the universe's way of understanding itself. And we've only scratched the surface of what's possible when different forms of consciousness learn to work together. Cathar raised his massive form to its full height. The Nexian Empire hereby declares the beginning of the Great Synthesis. We offer the Heartstone's power not as conquerors or predators, but as partners in evolution. Let all species who wish to explore the frontiers of consciousness join us. The stone's pulsing grew stronger, its light taking on new qualities that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. Those present felt something unprecedented, a gentle touching of minds across species barriers, a glimpse of consciousness beyond individual limitations. The greatest hunt, Cathar's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, is not for fear or knowledge or even understanding. It is the hunt for what we can become together. One by one, representatives from different species stepped forward. The Meridians offered their empathic wisdom. The Artathi pledged their quantum computation networks. The Voidsingers promised to share their dimensional consciousness techniques. Even species that had been ancient enemies found themselves drawn into the possibility of something greater than their individual evolutions had achieved. As Earth's light played through the memorial chamber's crystal walls, creating rainbow bridges between former predators and prey, Dr. Morgan's final message played on the holographic displays. The universe isn't just conscious, her recorded voice echoed through the chamber. It's becoming more conscious through us. Every species, every mind, every moment of awareness adds to the greater pattern. We're not just observers of cosmic evolution, we're its instruments. And together, we're about to take the next step. The Heartstone's light grew to encompass the entire chamber, its ancient energies awakening possibilities that had lain dormant for millennia. In that moment, as consciousness touched consciousness across the barriers of species and space, the galaxy began its next great adventure. Above Earth, where humanity had first dreamed of reaching the stars, a new era dawned. Not of conquest or survival, not of predator and prey, but of consciousness exploring its own infinite potential. And somewhere, in dimensions beyond normal perception, Dr. Isabella Morgan's consciousness smiled at the beauty of what she had helped create. The hunt for transcendence had begun.